Hey kiddies, it's Triple Feature Tuesday, and this week we're going to look at Michael Massee Sleazeballs. Last week we got some terrible news. Michael Massee, or Massee, I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name, passed away from stomach cancer. He was 64 years old. I knew him best from The Crow. The Crow, to a large extent, is still one of my absolute favorite movies. So anybody that was in The Crow, I sort of keep track of, and you know, I'm always delighted when they pop up in other things. And one of those was Michael Massee, who was a pretty decent that guy actor. Like, he did more TV than he did films. Every time he popped up in a film, I was really, really happy and excited. So we're going to look at 3 of my favorite performances of his. So our menu is going to include The Crow, Seven, and Lost Highway, with honorable mention to Playing God. It's The Crow. I'm sorry. I've gone on at length about it before, so I'm not going to go too nuts with it. But it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. I still will watch it at least once a year, and it hasn't lost any luster at all. In fact, at the time of this recording, it's coming up because I try to watch it the day before Halloween because so much of the events happen on Devil's Night. Michael Massee, or Massee, plays Fun Boy, the one of the more reprehensible characters in the whole movie. He's part of T-Bird's crew, and he's just a heroin-addicted scumbag. I mean, there's really not much to it. He had, the character in the comic was a little bit meatier in terms of being repentant, but this one, Massee just plays him to the hilt in terms of just being nothing but drugs, sex, and murder. That's all he does. Because, like, you look at the other members of the crew, and they seem to have functions. Like, T-Bird is a demolition guy and the expert. Tintin seems to be a much better hand-to-hand combat guy with the knives and everything. And Skank is, of course, T-Bird's little lackey, and every leader needs a good lackey. But Fun Boy, he's just there to get his rocks off and, you know, have fun. It's a shame. Fun Boy had at least one more scene in the film that got cut out. Originally in The Crow, the Eric Draven character, they were going to explain him being vulnerable at the end of the movie in a slightly different way that I'm not going to go into. They were going to show evidence of this earlier in the film by Fun Boy injuring him. And so after Eric helps Darla by magically siphoning the morphine, out of her bloodstream, Fun Boy was supposed to wake up and dive into a pile of cocaine, go nuts, and start attacking Eric with a straight razor. And you can actually see a picture of it in the Crow movie book. You can see him right there getting ready to go nuts. Eric would have defended himself with his forearms, and they would have gotten cut up by the straight razor, and they wouldn't have healed because of reasons. And that would have prompted him to tape up his arms, which are still taped up throughout the entire movie, but it's just never explained. You can't talk about this without talking about the horrible tragedy that happened and the fact that Michael Massee was actually the actor that fired the gun that ended up killing Brandon Lee. Ironically, if you've read the details of the incident, Massee was the person least responsible for what happened there. The prop masters and the gun technicians and all the other people that should have been double-checking everything weren't, and as a result, when he pulled the trigger, the unthinkable happened. And it weighed heavily on Massee. He quit acting for at least a year, and as late as 2005 said that he still had nightmares from the whole thing, which is tragic for not only the incident that happened, that a person that really wasn't at fault should have to live with that for presumably the rest of his life. But Fun Boy really set the tone for the parts that Massee would play for basically the rest of his career. I don't know, you know, and I'm going to get into good bits where he plays not horrible people, but he just had that face of just kind of, I think it's just this malevolence in the eyes that probably betrayed the fact that he more than likely was one of the nicer people you could meet. He always seemed nice at appearances and everything, and was very upfront about talking about all the stuff that happened. So it's sort of a shame that he was always doing that, but he was so good at it. As evidenced in Seven. He is in Seven for maybe 5 minutes, but it is such a memorable 5 minutes. Like, think about Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs, he's only in the movie for 20 minutes. Or Robert Shaw getting a Best Actor nomination for Man from All Seasons, even though he's in it for like 8 minutes. It's quality, not quantity. So Michael Massee plays the booth attendant at the sex club where the lust victim is found, and he is later interviewed by Brad Pitt's character at the police station, and he says everything with his eyes. Like, he has a bit of dialogue with one of the more memorable lines that's not actually uttered by John Doe in response to Brad Pitt's question as to whether or not he likes the things he does and the stuff he sees. And he leans in, and it's so good, and he says, "No, I don't, but that's life." And it sort of encapsulates the whole movie in that one scene, and he gets the line, and he nails it, and so he's just great. There's always, like, no matter what he's doing, there's always just a level of realism to him. Like, it feels very natural. Like, if you watch the episode of The X-Files, The Field in Which I Died, where he plays a David Koresh-esque cult leader, he does not go totally nuts with the character at all. He's not like waving his arms around and being all fire and brimstone preacher. He's just, I have these beliefs. These beliefs are the way it is, and you either are accepting it or you're not, and that's it. And he would bring that every time. Another little bit. One fine day, he's in there for 4 minutes as Michelle Pfeiffer's ex-husband, and it's like different levels of jerk that he could play, where he's just, you know, not a deadbeat father. He loves his kid, but he just can't be around, and he doesn't really care that much if he's not around, because, you know, he's going to go tour with Bruce Springsteen next year, so hooray. Second to last, we're going to talk about David Lynch's Lost Highway, where, I mean, there's too much to talk about Lost Highway, but Michael Massee plays Andy, a man of ill repute who runs, at minimum, a pornography ring in which Patricia Arquette has to participate. He plays Andy. We first meet Andy and his pencil mustache at the party, because that's actually his party, the party in which Bill Pullman meets the Mystery Man. That's actually Andy's party, and he's buddies with Dick Laurent, who is going to be a major character later. And he's just kind of there, and like I love contrasting like the party scene with his later death scene. Sorry, spoilers for a movie that's just under 20 years old. Where in the party scene, he's just mild, he's just a little creepy. Like, but it's Los Angeles, or at least California, so, you know, rich people making their money however they make it, and people are just kind of weird and strange. His behavior and his mustache aren't dispositive of who he is until you see it later, when he is just full-on running Patricia Arquette's life and working with Dick Laurent, aka Mr. Eddie, at the end. And he's the guy that Patricia Arquette and Balthazar Getty are going to rob at the end, and he gets beat up, but then springs to life and has an even worse death when he falls face first into a glass table. It's one of the more gruesome parts of the movie, and so it's kind of fun. We're going to put Seven and Lost Highway together, and then the real third movie is actually Playing God, in which he doesn't play, technically, a bad guy. In the David Duchovny crime doctor movie with Timothy Hutton and Angelina Jolie, Michael Massee plays FBI agent Gage, who is not a bad guy. He's not crooked, just a little bent, but in the name of justice, and is more just an antagonist than an actual bad guy. And so it's kind of fun, him being, you know, basically playing the same sorts of character, but on the side of right. Go on the IMDb and then go onto Netflix, because there's no shortage of appearances that he had from TV. The X-Files episode I mentioned is on there. He's got a couple episodes of Supernatural. He was in both the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man films. He's the guy in the background at the end, and, you know, doing all sorts of sneaky stuff in the second one. Again, he was one of those guys that I would just notice, and I'm going to miss that, because I was always delighted when he popped up in things, because, you know, you knew what his character was going to be about more often than not, and it was going to be entertaining. Sad to see him go, and hopefully we'll have a more cheerful triple feature for you guys next week.